Welcome everyone. Let's bow in. Bowing is simply a way of bringing ourselves present. And so tonight we're going to continue our discussion of Francesca Fremantle's book, Luminous, Emptiness. We'll be talking about the last half of the chapter titled The Luminosity of Death, and the beginning part of the chapter that follows, Invincible Peace. So we're actually going to be talking about two Bardos tonight. So there's a lot to be said. I wanted to say a couple of things about the text, actually both texts, the Luminous Emptiness as well as the Tibetan Book of the Dead itself. It's quite common in the Dzogchen teachings as well as the Mahamudra teachings to talk about different types of practitioners. And it can be worded in different ways, but the idea is always the same. There are those who are considered exceptional or sudden realizers who, because of practice and study and realization in past lives, need very little to wake them up fully. And so it's said that simply hearing the title of a text or seeing an image of the Buddha is enough to bring about awakening. There are what are called middling practitioners or inconsistent realizers who have some realization, but it comes and goes. And then there are what are considered average or gradual realizers who need quite a bit of repeated reminding, practice, and study in order to come to realization. Speaking for myself, I know which category I'm in. I'm definitely a gradual realizer. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that it can sometimes be confusing in Francesca Fremantle's text, as well as in the Tibetan Book of the Dead itself, in the different kinds of instructions that are sometimes presented, because they're meant for people at these different levels of realization. So that it's said that someone who has already recognized the nature of mind, and this will be clear in what we're going to talk about tonight, really the experience of death, while it does involve the loss of a physical body, is in a sense no change at all, because there's no change at all in the continuity of awareness, the recognition of the true nature of mind. And then on the other end, you have people who, as it says, people of average ability, who need a great deal of reminding, and the instructions for practice and what might be, how they might work with the Bardo experience can be quite different. I thank everyone for taking this class because it put me in the position of having to read this text very carefully more than once. And I will say that the author, Francesca Fremantle, at times goes back and forth in talking about the type of experience or the type of instruction that might be suited to someone who's an exceptional student, an exceptional realizer, and students or practitioners who are more average abilities. And then also there's advice in different parts of the book for people who might have done different types of practice. That, for instance, people who've done visualization practice might, if they realize that they are entered the Bardo experience, remember to visualize themselves as the deity, the Yidam, whatever practice they've been doing, and in that way wake themselves up. Whereas for other people, it's recommended that just simply remember whatever practice they were doing, remember compassion and bodhicitta, or even just to feel some devotion to the Guru, and that might be enough to wake somebody up fully. So for that reason, it can sometimes seem confusing, but if we understand that, as Pulnop Rinpoche says in his book, Mind Beyond Death, everybody's experience in the Bardo is going to be somewhat different based on where they're at and what kinds of experiences they've had and what their karma is. So with that, let's begin. So we're picking up where we left off last week at the bottom of page 239. And the first line of that paragraph lets us know what Francesca Fremantle is talking about. For those who need more assistance. That's how the paragraph at the bottom of page 239 begins. So here we're talking about practitioners, the gradual realizers, people who have not had that much experience and realization, and study and meditation practice. And with that, she goes back to reminding us about the dissolution process that we talked about last week, that with the approach of death, the elements in the body begin to break down, that the solidity of earth begins to give way to the liquidity of water, so there's less of a sense of definiteness about things. And this goes on, earth into water, water then dissolves into the fire element, where there's a sense of both dryness and heat. That dissolves into air, which is even more diffuse, more of a sense of space, and then into consciousness. But the key point and this is true throughout this text, the key point is that every stage in the process of dying, there's the possibility of breaking through into some level of realization, just as there is during every moment of life. And again, that's one of the messages in this book. It's a message that we could take into our lives right now, that at any point in time, it's possible to wake up. And every moment here means now. It's just like when we come back in meditation practice, that we can actually be present with ourselves. In any case, she also points out that as the elements dissolve, if we're able to let go of grasping and attachment, not give in to fear, tall order, given what's actually happening as we're dying. But if we're able to do that, if we're able to let go of our fixation on having to have things a certain way, then at each point we could let go into emptiness rather than identifying with the physical disintegration that's taking place. In any case, so again, there's reminder after reminder, possibility after possibility, moment after moment of waking up. When the dissolution is almost complete, the person is urged to remain, as she says, is urged to remain fully awake and attentive, and to be fully present with the experience, and not to let thoughts wander and to arouse bodhicitta. And at this point, I'm just going to read a little piece from the Book of the Dead, because this is actually what will be read at this point. I should also say that although most of the Book of the Dead is advice for the dying or dead person, but a certain amount also is advice for the person who might be reading the text. In any case, what's said at this point, as the dissolution is near complete: O child of noble family, that which is called death has now arrived, so you should adopt this attitude. I have arrived at the time of death, so now, by means of this death, I will adopt only the attitude of the enlightened state of mind, friendliness and compassion, and attain perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings as limitless as space. With this attitude, at this special time, for the sake of all sentient beings, I will recognize the luminosity of death as a dharmakaya, and attaining in that state the supreme realization of the great symbol, I will act for the good of all beings. If I do not attain this, I will recognize the Bardos state as it is, and attaining the indivisible great symbol form in the Bardo, I will act for the good of all beings as limitless as space in whatever way will influence them. Without letting go of this attitude, you should remember and practice whatever meditation teaching you have received in the past. So this is from the Book of the Dead itself, which she also translated with Trungpa Rinpoche. So when she talks about the Great Seal, or I think in Luminous Emptiness she refers to it directly as Mahamudra, as she says, she has a couple of paragraphs kind of generally describing Mahamudra. If Dzogchen or Ati is the main practice in the Nyingma tradition, Mahamudra is the main practice in the Kagyu tradition. In what they attempt to help a practitioner realize, they're the same. The true nature of mind, called Rigpa in the Dzogchen tradition, the ordinary mind, or Tamalgye Shepa in the Kagyu tradition. Some of the techniques and language is different. The essential realization is the same. And when she talks about the great realization of Mahamudra, basically she's talking about realizing the unity of appearance emptiness, which is characteristic of mind itself, and because all things are perceived through mind, therefore is characteristic of anything that arises in mind, which is the essential idea of Mahamudra practice. Mahamudra itself means the Great Seal, which, as she says, is like the King's Seal. But the idea is that all things are sealed with emptiness, actually emptiness, appearance emptiness, and that all things are symbols of their own true nature. So in this case, the dying, anyway, to continue with and the other idea, I should say also, is that when we're able to realize this, the true nature of mind, in Bardo experience, then we wake up fully and we have the opportunity to manifest in whatever way would be a benefit to sentient beings. So, as it says in the text, this could be as a Nirmanakaya Buddha or Sambhogakaya Buddha or whatever is at that time seems the most beneficial. As it mentions, the dying person is asked to do whatever practice they're used to. So if that was Yidam practice or visualization practice, it would be that. If it was Shamatha Vipassana, they would do that. But the main thing is remembering that the enlightened attitude, that I will attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And at that time, try to realize as best we can the true nature of mind. And then as it says in the text, when respiration is stopped, when there's the final breath, the person is put into what in Luminous Emptiness she calls the sleeping lion posture, which is how the Buddha lay as he died. If you've ever seen this, in Bangkok, Thailand, there's a temple with a reclining Buddha, which shows the Buddha at the time of death, basically lying on his right side with his hand under his head. Another hand lying on his thigh. And it's said that the Buddha liked to see the sunset, so he died watching the sunset. With the final respiration, when death has arrived, as is said in the text, prana dissolves into the avaduti. And depending, and this is one of the places where things can go in different directions, if the person has some experience in practice and recognition, at this point, they could recognize luminosity. Otherwise, a person becomes literally unconscious. If you remember last week, we talked about the bindus at the top of the head and in the lower end of the avaduti coming together in the heart center, and there's a red appearance, a white appearance. Might have those backwards, and then there's a black experience as the two come together, and if they're able to recognize luminosity, they might rest in meditation for a period of time. And again, this depends on the karma and realization of the person who's died, so it could be just moments to days. But usually in the Tibetan tradition, the body's left alone for 3 days. And with this, she again goes back to having stated all of these things that the person who's attending to the body, and these instructions are in the Book of the Dead, to put the person into the sleeping lion posture, to actually press the arteries on the neck, which helps keep the prana centralized in the avaduti rather than falling into the right and left channels, the rasana and lalana. So it again helps the person maintain some stability in their practice at that time. Then there's further instruction from the Book of the Dead. So again, I'll read from the text. Now the basic luminosity is shining before you. Recognize it and rest in the practice. And this would be the instruction for someone who is fairly well realized. For the rest of us, O child of noble family, and you'd actually say their name, listen. Now the pure luminosity of the Dharmata, is shining before you. Recognize it. O child of noble family, at this moment your state of mind is by nature pure emptiness. It does not possess any nature whatever, neither substance nor quality such as color, but is pure emptiness. This is the Dharmata, the female body, Buddha Samantabhadri. But this state of mind is not just blank emptiness. It is unobstructed, sparkling, pure, and vibrant. This mind is the male Buddha Samantabhadra. These two, your mind whose nature is emptiness without any substance whatsoever, and your mind which is vibrant and luminous, are inseparable. This is the Dharmakaya of the Buddha. This mind of yours is inseparable luminosity and emptiness in the form of a great mass of light. It has no birth or death, therefore it is the Buddha of immortal light. To recognize this is all that is necessary. When you recognize this pure nature of your mind as the Buddha, looking into your own mind is resting in the Buddha mind. So this is what would be read after the person dies and where they might be experiencing luminosity. And again, the key thing is the recognition, recognizing that this is what's happening. I really like the way that she talks about some of these things in the text. I think she does a very good job of describing some fairly difficult things. But basically, the true nature of mind, or as it's phrased there, one's own naked awareness, is not, as she says, is none other than the primordial state of enlightenment, the ultimate discovery of our own basic goodness, our original awareness that has never strayed from the state of wakefulness. And in other texts, this is called, again, the meeting of mother and child. The mother is the ground luminosity, that's our true nature. The child luminosity is whatever we might have experienced in meditation practice and whatever we might have come to realize in our lives. And that these come together. And at that point, it's said that we have an exceptional chance to attain enlightenment after death by recognizing the true nature of our mind at this point in the Bardo. So when they said one's own naked awareness, it's literally talking about just pure open mind without any pure non-conceptual, non-dual, self-arisen awareness, which we could recognize in our practice, we could recognize in our lives, but that is vividly clear at this point in death. It's also said to be the experience of the Dharmakaya. So again, with these dissolutions, in Punlop Rinpoche's book, Mind Beyond Death, the dissolutions of the body, the earth into water, water into fire, fire into air, is the dissolving of the Nirmanakaya, the body. That the inner dissolution, where the bindus come together at the heart and we experience the white, red, and black attainments, is the manifestation of the Sambhogakaya. And luminosity is the Dharmakaya, empty just in the way that it described, empty and yet awake, aware, clear, luminous, which is why she titled her book Luminous Emptiness, because at its heart, that's the true nature of mind. She goes on to say, and this is on page, I think I have the number wrong, 243 maybe, recognition of empty luminosity is the true nature of mind. And here we again differentiates between an awakened person and person of, again, gradual realizer, average abilities. For the awakened person who fully understands the meaning of death, it's simply one of the many transformations of limitless life. This is why when the Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa died, he said nothing happens. Because it was just one more experience, one more display in one more moment in the ceaseless continuity of awareness. But for someone with some experience and confidence in meditation, which hopefully is every one of us, it is the supreme opportunity to attain enlightenment because it becomes so clear at that point in time. It's said that as the body dissolves, as we're able to let go of the body, that there's less obstruction to our awareness. So if we're not overcome by fear and panic, but are able to have some sense of the stability and clarity of meditation practice, it's an incredible opportunity to actually wake up fully right on the spot. And again, back and forth in the text, in Francesca Fremantle's text. From the absolute point of view, birth, life, and death are the spontaneous play of awareness, simply the display of awareness, continually arising from and dissolving back into the primordial ground, the space of luminous emptiness. Buddha nature pervades at all times and in all existence without any gaps. Buddha nature is always present, whether we're waking, sleeping, dreaming, or dying. When we fall asleep or die, the fading of the outer senses and elements, it's said that they draw inward, means that our inner subtle awareness manifests. But because we're unfamiliar with it, we experience only unconsciousness or death. But if we're actually awake and can open ourselves to that experience, dissolve into that experience, rest in that experience, it's, as she says, a supreme opportunity to attain enlightenment, which is why the Book of the Dead emphasizes so much recognizing the luminosity. From the relative point of view of our present condition, so again, speaks more on the level, again, I don't want to, at least for myself, I'm at, death is, in one sense, is the most devastating event of our whole life. And the goal for us as practitioners is to see through the illusion of death, remember its inevitability relative to ego and ego pursuits, is a powerful center for practice. And with this, she talks a little bit about the 4 reminders that which we recite before our practice every session. The rare opportunity of having a human birth where we're able to practice the Dharma and where we meet a teacher who can introduce us to the Dharma. The inevitability of death, that this opportunity doesn't last forever, so we should take advantage of it now. The reality of karma, the inevitability of cause and effect, that sooner or later whatever action we take will have its effect. And then finally, the unsatisfactory nature of samsara, that the best we can get out of samsara is temporary happiness that fades away and then leads to pain and regret. So, as she says, you would think that it should be easy, having come to understand some of these things, to let go of ego, to let go of fixation, to let go of grasping. But in fact, as she says, strange as it may seem, although this grasping ego is really nothing but a cause of grief, it's extremely hard to let go of it. Of course, part of that is you have to look at who's doing or what's doing the letting go. She said you might think it would be a relief to get rid of such a burden and dissolve into the light of reality, but it's terrifying because we still have the illusion of someone hoping to survive. And with this, she says that enlightenment ultimately means the death of ego, or at least the seeming death of something that really doesn't exist to begin with. But from the point of view of ego and the belief that there's some sense of ongoing permanent identity that lasts, it does seem like something gets lost. And it's letting go of that illusion, seeing through the illusory nature of ego, that makes it possible for us to actually let go completely. As she says, the essence of all Bardos states relates to this paradox manifesting itself in various situations. The tension between trying to hang on and watch what's happening, or letting go completely into the inconceivable, the unknowable. And I would also say this is true, this is what we experience in meditation practice, that in one sense the instruction is simply to let go into awareness, to let go of reference point, to let go of any kind of concept of any kind of doing, and to relax completely into whatever state of mind we might be experiencing, to let go of any attempt to create a different state of mind or something that we might think better. But we have to let go. There's otherwise we end up holding on some subtle or obvious level that obstructs our practice. In any case, as she says, if we have gained no depth or stability in meditation, we'll be unable to remain focused and aware during the process of dying. So this, again, this is the truth of impermanence, that if we cling, if we have no confidence in the basic goodness of the nature of mind, we're unable to let go into open space. The instruction, again, at this point in the Book of the Dead, is we should apply whatever practice we've done and any insight we have at the time of death. We'll come back to that in a minute. She says that the views and methods that are taught specifically in relation to death in the Book of the Dead are in essence the same as those practiced during life. But that the characteristic of the bardo of dying is the dissolution practice. And we need to understand this so that we have some ability to withstand the quality of dread and panic as we feel things slipping away, at the disintegration and loss of everything we know. And she points out that we can have these experiences in life. As she says, can happen when we experience an unexpected shock or devastating news or abrupt or significant change. And the point is, we come to realize, if we are able to maintain some degree of awareness at such times, that the tighter we hold on, the worse it gets. That ultimately letting go is the only remedy. She says less dramatically, we experience fear of annihilation when we recognize a certain period of our life has come to an end. Looking back and thinking, oh, life will never be the same again as we grow older. She says it's always painful to let go of something we identify with. It's interesting, we don't want to change, yet we can't avoid letting go. So in fact, holding on just makes our suffering worse. And if we're able to relax, let go, then we're able to recognize something that otherwise, because of our panic and fear, becomes much more difficult to work with in any kind of positive way. She says the process of dissolving from coarse to subtle, which is again the dissolution of the elements, and then the dissolution of consciousness, followed by the reverse evolution from subtle to coarse, is taking place all the time again, because that's what happens in the next Bardos. We go from, at the point of luminosity, we totally dissolved into the Dharmakaya, if we're able to recognize it. Otherwise, we just lapse into unconsciousness, it's said. What happens in the next Bardos, we begin to then experience Sambhogakaya experiences, emanations of the deities, and so things begin to take some kind of form again. So this is what she means: the process of dissolving from coarse to subtle, followed by the reverse evolution from subtle to coarse, takes place within us all the time. And if we're actually able to slow down enough in meditation practice, we can sometimes see this. We can see a thought dissolve and another thought arise. And from moment to moment, that things come together and come apart. As she says, normally we're completely unaware of the subtle basis of consciousness, or remain completely identified with its superficial manifestations. But as each moment of consciousness passes away, it gives birth to the next. And underlying all of these experiences that arise and pass away is dharmata, the true nature of phenomena, which is open and empty space. So the idea is, if we're able to let go between thoughts, if we're able to see the gap between the cessation of one thought and the arising of the next, the karmic chain is cut. Or as Milarepa says, between two thoughts is non-conceptual awareness. Between two thoughts is Buddha. There's always a gap, always a bardo between cessation and arising, where luminosity can be recognized and the aware, awakened state can come to be seen to be ever-present and all-pervading. As she says, letting go is the essence of all formless meditations, as taught at the beginning of the path that reaches its perfection in Dzogchen. When meditation is described as letting go into space, it really is like consciousness dissolving into space of death. If we could practice it fully and completely, no other method would be necessary. So that's how we end the chapter on the Bardo of dying. And I think at this point, what I'd like to suggest is that we actually do some practice. So if we could all take a good seat and straighten our backs. And just begin to allow ourselves to settle. We've already gone through quite a bit, but if we could just let go of what we've been talking about and just follow the breath. Again, particularly the out-breath, because with the out-breath there's a dissolving. Just feel the rhythm of the breathing. Slow down. So the instruction that we're given, working with the breath in particular, is that as we breathe out, we identify with the breath. And it's just as the breath then expands and dissolves into space, our awareness could expand and dissolve into the space. And at the end of the out-breath, we let go completely into simple awareness. Allow ourselves to relax. Relax the mind and body. Let go of any sense of effort, including any effort to let go. And just allow ourselves to be. Thank you. I wanted to say a couple of things about the practice that we just did. The first is that in letting go, again, I'm more familiar with the Mahamudra tradition than the Dzogchen tradition, but it really emphasizes letting go of any sense of effort. It talks about resting in mind that's not fabricated, not contrived in any way. Sometimes when we practice, we're able to perhaps just let go completely and simply be awake. Sometimes it seems like we go through, at least for myself, I go through levels of realizing some level of effort or goal or contrivance and having to let go and let go and let go. But altogether, I think that this is not unlike what we're asked to do in the in the Bardo of dying. Is just be able to relax, let go. Let go of any sense of expectation, let go of any sense of goal, and just simply be in our experience just as it is. Let go into awareness, which is in this very moment luminous and clear. And so in practicing meditation, we prepare for this opportunity to perhaps recognize the great luminosity that we experience at the moment of death. So, in any case, we must move on to the next chapter, which is titled Invincible Peace. And with this, we begin talking about the Bardo of Dharmata. So we're moving on to the next Bardo. I should say, if we're able to recognize luminosity, then we don't experience the Bardos. Just as at the moment of death, a fully recognized person, there's no change at all. They've already had this realization, but those are very few people, very few. It's at that moment that we might be able to, again, if we've had some practice, be able to effect the transfer of consciousness that we talked about last week. We've had some preparation to do that kind of practice. But again, the idea is whatever practice we've done, we try to remember and allow ourselves to open ourselves to ourselves in the Bardo. In any case, another chapter, and we move on to another Bardo, the Bardo of Dharmata. Just as a reminder, several chapters back, there was an entire chapter on Bardo experience called Bardo, the Experience of Nowness, because every Bardo is always now. The Bardo that you and I, each one of us is in right now, Bardo. And there are a lot of different ways. She gives a lot of definitions of Bardo as an interval, a gap, a boundary that divides experience. But the important thing is it's the experience of nowness. It's a crossroad. And she says when we're able to wake up and recognize the Bardo, as she says, it's a crossroads where one makes a decision about what path to take. And in the Bardo of Dharmata, there are a lot of decisions about what path to take. I think that will be more clear next week when we talk about the specific experiences that are said to occur on each day in the Bardo of Dharmata. The first part of this chapter is sort of her introduction to the whole experience of the Bardo of Dharmata. And then the second half of the chapter goes into the specifics of the visions that occur on each specific day. But the other thing I wanted to remind everyone about is that what distinguishes the different Bardos, one from another, they indicate different modes of consciousness. So in one sense, that's one way in which one Bardo could be said to differ from another. And yet, at the same time, it always comes down to the same thing. Can we wake up in the moment? Can we be present with ourselves, present with our experience fully? Can we let go completely into non-dual, non-conceptual awareness that we might have glimpses of in meditation practice? But the type of vision, the types of experiences that we have are very different. Just as in the Bardo of our waking life is very different from the type of consciousness, the kinds of things that we experience in the Bardo of dreams at night when we're sleeping. In this case, we're going to be talking about the Bardo of Dharmata. So basically, she starts off by defining Dharmata, which she says literally means dharminess. It's literally the essential quality of things as they are. So it's not the appearance of things in an ordinary sense, but it's their true nature, the true nature of phenomena, reality, as she says, in its pure, original, unconditioned state, not constructed from or dependent on anything else. She says it's unobscured by the veils that distort our vision and uncontaminated by the poisons of passion, aggression, and delusion. In other words, it's not our usual way of seeing things. It's we may have moments of having some sense of the real vividness, energetic quality, the dynamic quality of things, the fact that the there and yet empty, impermanent, but still very vividly clear to us. I also, by the way, looked up the definition because she mentions passion, aggression, and delusion rather than passion, aggression, and ignorance. So I looked up the precise definition of delusion because it actually applies very well to a good deal of what she talks about in this chapter and relates directly to what Ati or Dzogchen teaches about why we misperceive things. So a delusion technically is something that's believed to be true or real, but that's actually false or unreal. And that delusion implies some inability to distinguish between what's real and what only seems to be real. And basically what she's saying is, so if you keep that in mind, it makes it a little bit clearer what she's about to talk about in terms of what Dzogchen teaches about why we misperceive the world, basically. So what she says is when the basic luminosity dawned at the end of the Bardo of dying, it was called the luminosity of Dharmata. And she says it's the experience of mind's essential nature, open and empty like space. Again, space is sometimes used as one way of understanding something of the empty nature of mind, that it can't be located in any place, it doesn't have particular form or color. All the things, it actually, is very similar to what I read out of the Tibetan Book of the Dead when it talked about the empty quality of space. So the luminosity of Dharmata is the experience of mind's essential nature, open and empty like space. Now, what happens in the Bardo of Dharmata is from out of that luminosity of Dharmata, the appearances of the Bardo of Dharmata arise. And she says these are actually the natural creative energy of mind, this unfolding in a dynamic play of sound, color, and rays of light. And another way of saying this is that the Dharmakaya manifests as Sambhogakaya. So Sambhogakaya is certainly not something that's solid or pinpointable either, but there's more form here than there was in the experience of Dharmakaya and the Bardo of luminosity that occurred then. So the mind was absorbed in the luminosity of death, was identified as the Dharmakaya, which she says was the inseparable union of Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri, which is what it said in the Book of the Dead text. These are Samantabhadra is the male figure, Samantabhadri is the female, Samantabhadra is blue, Samantabhadri is white, and they're always seen in union. They're basically the primordial purity in which samsara, nirvana, as she says, in which samsara, nirvana, birth and death, self and other have never existed. So by saying purity, what we're talking about is this is pointing to the true nature of mind from a Dzogchen point of view. It points to the original, essential, inherent nature of everything. And each one of those words, original, primordial, the first thing that arises, essential in that it's the base of, it's the essence of everything, and inherent in that in terms of our mind, it's what we truly are. It's not something, as it says in text, nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be taken away. We just need to fully realize it. And this is the nature of all things. As she says, it's like a mirror that's never affected by what it reflects. So that's true of this essential, primordial, fundamental nature of our mind. It's never affected by what it reflects. Now, because we believe in an ego and get caught up in the reflections and then reflections of the reflections, we get lost and confused. But whenever we're able to go back to this, the primordial nature of mind, it's completely pure. When it says the purified elements are the Devis and the purified skandhas are the Buddhas, it means they have never been anything else. So again, in talking about the Bardo of Dharmata, in the boundless openness of space, which is, again, the fundamental nature of mind, the basic nature of luminosity, the spontaneous self-display of the awakened state begins to unfold. So she's talking, again, trying to communicate, tell us what it is that's happening in the Bardo of Dharmata. Non-dual awareness, recognizing whatever appears as its own nature, is Samantabhadra, the primordial awakened one. So self-display is an interesting term. There are a lot of, in Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions, a lot of use of the word self, not in the sense of ego, but in the sense of, in a more simple way, or maybe in a more understandable way, the experience of being aware that we're aware, except that in this case it's a full recognition of awareness without any kind of obstruction or reference point. But that it's awareness recognizing itself. It's sometimes it's described as reflexive awareness to try to get away from the word self because self becomes confusing. But again, it's awareness fully aware of itself. But as she says, when there's no recognition, when we don't recognize that this is the true nature, the fundamental nature, the original, essential, inherent nature of our mind to begin with, then dualistic consciousness of ordinary sentient beings develops, and experience becomes divided into subject and object, and that all this happens in mind. So this is the fundamental delusion. We go back to a belief in something that we think is real but actually isn't real. And she goes into this and she talks about it as 4 dissolutions, but the basic idea is that space dissolves into luminosity. And if we actually recognize this luminosity as the nature of our mind, then whatever appears in that luminosity we realize is also mind. But that's not what happens. What happens is the luminous, knowing, clear nature of mind manifests in such a way, and we take that to be other. take that to be something else, rather than seeing the luminous display of mind as mind itself. And from there, we develop all kinds of, develop all of the logics and dramas and everything of ego. So that's the fundamental delusion. That's the fundamental ignorance, is not realizing the nature of mind and realizing that all experience is mind as well, that all perception is mind, all thoughts are mind. In a small way, it's like what we experience in meditation practice, the difference between recognizing thought as thought and taking thought to be real. And I think, this becomes very clear to us, I think, in meditation practice, that sometimes we're able to see, we're aware I'm thinking, so we don't get caught up in it. Other times we take thought to be real and we're, off to the races. But in a much more fundamental way, failing to recognize the basic luminosity of mind leads to some kind of, some duality, some sense of self and other. And it's out of all that samsara develops. She talks about this as 4 dissolutions, but it's not dissolutions, I think, in quite the same way that talked about dissolutions in the other chapter. It's really mind dissolving into other states of mind. And the one I wanted to mention next was the second one, where she says luminosity dissolves into the states of 2 and 1. Which actually, I think in this case, I think there's a footnote that kind of describes this, but I've usually heard it termed as inseparability, the inseparability of appearance emptiness, the inseparability of awareness emptiness. But the idea is then there's this devolves into some kind of division into self and other. In any case, to continue, in the Bardo of Dharmata, it manifests then as we begin seeing the deities. It begins with seeing light and color, and then it crystallizes, as she says, crystallizes into the form of the deities. And again, we'll be talking about that more next week when we actually go through the specifics of the different visions that appear. But again, you can kind of see from this open, luminous, boundless sense of space, things beginning to coalesce or come together again, or crystallize, as she says. It's into this coming together. And these are, again, Sambhogakaya manifestations that are, as she says, empty yet apparent. The next thing is, again, and this is described in the Book of the Dead, that the deities dissolve into knowledge, manifesting as penetrating rays of light shining out from their heart center. These are the pure essence of the 5 ways of knowing. So these were the 5 wisdoms that we talked about in a previous chapter. I meant to look up her terms for them because she uses somewhat different terms than the ones I'm familiar with, but there's like the mirror-like wisdom, just the ability to see things exactly as they are without distortion. The wisdom of equanimity or equality, being able to see the richness in all experiences, whatever that might be, and the equality of all experiences, that everything arises in emptiness and so on. So the 5 wisdoms were described in another chapter, and I'm not going to go through all of them again. And then the rays of light dissolve into the 8 gates of spontaneous existence, where the potentialities of both samsara and nirvana appear simultaneously. It's at that point that we make choices of some kind to either identify and merge with the Sambhogakaya manifestations of the enlightened nature of our mind, or we end up becoming caught up again in the 6 realms because of the division of self and other and the kind of solidification that happens with that. So again, this goes back to her definition of Bardo as crossroads, where we make choices about which path we're going to take. So as she says, either, and here again, at every point in the Bardo, just as in every moment of our life, there's always the possibility of waking up. Either one is liberated by recognizing these visions as the manifestations of one's own mind, or one drifts into the Bardo of existence, which is the Bardo that follows the Bardo of Dharmata, which she calls Bardo of existence. But in the original Book of the Dead, it was called the Bardo of becoming. She seemed to prefer the title Bardo of existence. I personally think Bardo of becoming is a really good description of what happens. That's where we get so caught up in hope and fear and we begin really looking for a body, which eventually leads to our being reborn in one of the realms of samsara. So she then goes back to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and we're back on page 251. If the person does not recognize the luminosity that dawned at the end of the bardo of dying, they remain unconscious for a moment to 4.5 days. Although it says in the text, on average, the time it takes to eat a meal. And again, this varies from person to person. As Pulmop Rinpoche says, everyone experiences the bardo in their individual, unique way. Then prana escapes the body, and consciousness becomes clear again. And as she says, and I'll quote directly from the text, immediately on waking from the unconscious state, the subtle tendencies toward duality and the sense of self are reactivated. The person experiences the three lights. This is again the experience of red, white, and black, and the reappearance of subtle elements in reverse order. So the person then begins experiencing a mental body that can see and hear just as in a dream. So just as in a dream we feel we have a body in a dream, at this point in the Bardo of Dharmata we feel that we have a body. She says there's some ambiguity in the text, with there's some back and forth that seems to be between the Bardo of Dharmata and Bardo of Becoming. But the point is, and I think this is kind of why, during the Bardo of Dharmata, consciousness is absorbed in the state of luminosity, but it's constantly on the verge of flickering into the Bardo of existence, the Bardo of Becoming. And I think that word flickering kind of gets at what seems to be described in the Book of the Dead, that the mind's kind of going back and forth, more solidity, less solidity, but still, there's still a sense of duality and of having a mental body. And then she talks about how the Book of the Dead gives instruction before describing the appearances in the Bardo of Dharmata. And what happens is, what the person actually experiences at this point, again, they've failed to recognize the true nature of mind and luminosity, and now they're entering the Bardo of Dharmata, is that consciousness becomes clear, and they may or may not be aware that they're dead. They're unaware of what happened. They don't know if they're dead or alive. This is said the second luminosity dawns. It's said that at that point, they can see and hear people, but people can't see or hear them. And it's, again, another experience of tremendous hope and fear and corresponding misperceptions that might arise in the Bardo of Becoming. But there's another opportunity also to recognize the nature of mind before consciousness is drawn into the Bardo of Becoming. So again, if we were to be reading this book to a person who's died, again and again, there's a reminder to wake up, a reminder to say, reminder that they've passed away, that they've died. The description in the book, if I can find it again. And again, this is advice for the reader, but it does apply to during this time when the violent, confused projections of karma have not yet appeared, and the terrors of the lords of death have not yet come, the instruction should be given. Here there is a distinction between the complete practice. If he was working on the complete practice, one should call his name 3 times and repeat the instruction above for showing the luminosity. So again, if a person was doing completion practice, you would remind them to recognize luminosity. If they were working on visualization practice, you would read aloud their sadhana and instruct them in the description of the yidam, and remind them of these words: "O son of noble family, meditate on your yidam and do not be distracted." If he's an ordinary person, one could show him by saying, "Meditate on the great Lord of Compassion," which is meditation on Avalokiteshvara, and meditation on bodhicitta. So there are different instructions, again, for people who are doing different types of practices and at different points in their practice. And again, she says that during this period of time, one has the chance to enter the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, or Nirmanakaya, depending on what they realize. And the reason for this is just, this a quote again, just as the light of the sun overcomes darkness, so the power of karma is overcome by the luminosity of the path, and liberation is attained. So again, if we're able to recognize the power of karma is overcome by the luminosity of the path, and liberation is attained. But again, at this point in time, the person may be experiencing that sense of disorientation, that without the anchor of a physical body, as she says, without the anchor of a physical body and familiar surroundings, there's a sense of disorientation, as all kinds of changing images arise from the mind like a confused dream. And again, says that the person should call the dead person by name and begin the great pointing out of the Bardo of Dharmata. Which reads like this: O son, O child of noble family, listen carefully without distraction. There are 6 Bardo states: the Bardo of birth, the Bardo of dreams, the Bardo of samadhi meditation, the Bardo of the moment before death, the Bardo of dharmata, and the Bardo of becoming. Child of noble family, you will experience 3 Bardo states: the Bardo of the moment before death, the Bardo of dharmata, and the Bardo of becoming. Of these 3, the luminosity of dharmata and the Bardo of the moment before death shone until yesterday, but you did not recognize it, and so you had to wander here. Now you'll experience the Bardo of dharmata and the Bardo of becoming, so recognize what I will show you without distraction. So again, the key thing is recognition. O child of noble family, now what is called death has arrived. You are not alone in leaving this world. It happens to everyone. So do not feel desire and yearning for this life. Even if you feel desire and yearning, you cannot stay. You can only wander in samsara. Do not desire. Do not yearn. Remember the 3 jewels. Child of noble family, whatever terrifying projections appear in the Bardo of Dharmata, do not forget these words, but go forward remembering their meaning. The essential point is to recognize with them. And then these are the words that are read. Now, when the Bardo of Dharmata dawns upon me, I will abandon all thoughts of fear and terror. I will recognize whatever appears as my projection and know it to be a vision of the Bardo. Now that I have reached this crucial point, I will not fear the peaceful and wrathful ones, my own projections. It continues, go forward, saying these words clearly and distinctly, and remembering the meaning. Do not forget them, for the essential point is to recognize with certainty that whatever appears, however terrifying, is your own projection. O child of noble family, when your body and mind separates, the Dharmata will appear pure and clear, yet hard to discern, luminous and brilliant, with terrifying brightness, shimmering like a mirage on a plain in spring. Do not be afraid of it. Do not be bewildered. This is a natural radiance of your own dharmata, therefore recognize it. Well, there's more, but I'll stop there to keep going. As she says, and it kind of says there, the first manifestation of the Bardo of Dharmata is an overwhelming display of light and sound filling the whole of space. This vibrant energy seems frightening and bewildering, though it's simply the expression of one's natural qualities. But the idea is that although these are our own qualities, they're seen as external. And she quotes Trungpa Rinpoche as saying that this kind of hallucinatory experience can occur during life, though not to the same degree, but that we can have this basic quality of desolation, loneliness, and flickering. And that this comes from a fear of emptiness, fear of losing oneself, the shakiness of a glimpse of egolessness. In any case, this initial display of light and sound forms into the peaceful and wrathful deities that one experiences, overwhelming, confusing, and terrifying. And again, the instructions repeat over and over that we should not fear, but instead let go and allow ourselves to merge with them, which again is like resting in awareness in meditation practice, dissolving into awareness, letting there be no separation. I'm thinking maybe we should stop here, that this has been quite a bit, and we can, we'll finish this section and go on into the actual visions that appear next week. But maybe stop for a moment here and see if there are any questions, comments, thoughts, experiences, anything that people would like to say or share. Steve?
Are there any like artworks or um iconography or anything that display the different Bardos? Because they seem very colorful and vivid, and I'm just kind of surprised that that's not more of a like kind of like the equivalent of like you have the Wheel of Life and the Six Realms. Is there anything like that for for the Bardos?
There are tankas that show the peaceful and wrathful deities. And interestingly, this is an odd memory, but I remember when I was at seminary that the shrine, the shrine that was set up in the front of the room was very brilliantly lit. And we were told that Trungpa Rinpoche specifically wanted it lit as bright as it could be because that is exactly what we would experience in the Barda. And that, again, the more familiar and comfortable we are with just the vividness and clarity in any moment of our life, the more prepared we are again for what we experience in the Barda. So there are, to answer your question, there are tankas of the paintings of the peaceful and wrathful deities. I think actually the plates in the book show them, but they're so small they're kind of hard to make out any detail. But if you look in the book, there's some colored photographs of different tankas, and it kind of shows at least some idea of what that experience is supposed to be like.
Thank you.
Sometimes I think if you've seen the end of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: Space Odyssey, I think that might,
That's
especially if
not
you can see it on,
that sounds about right.
if you can see it on a big screen. There's all these lights and I think that you know how we filmed that.
He went to one of the Bardos? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, yes, he did. He went to Las Vegas and they drove
Oh,
through the strip and then sped it up. And that's all the colors are actually now what they would do nowadays, because that was sometime in the late '60s they made that movie, early '70s. Nowadays you have all kinds of graphic art. But I think anything that's like that has that sense of brilliance and color, but it's somewhat overwhelming at the same time. Kind of gives a bit of a sense of at least how it's described in the text.
thank you.
Val?
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Um, this on page 245, specifically at the bottom, spoke to me. Um, it has a particular emotional quality of dread and panic at the disintegration of everything we are and the loss of everything we know. This same feeling can strike whenever we undergo some unexpected shock or receive devastating news.
Hmm.
And personally, I can recall, being in a large earthquake or having a traumatic experience and everything like falls away. And it's an interesting, it's a scary for me feeling. And I hope to be aware, more aware when those things come up as like training for the ultimate calling. away. So I've experienced that.
Well, as they say, that's the spirit.
It's just,
Exactly that's what we're being asked to do, or recognize that kind of opportunity.
yeah,
Again, we don't do something because we are relating to things, but that we could maintain some sense of mindfulness awareness, even with
a
these
shock,
things happening, even with a great shock.
great shocks
Doesn't
come.
mean it's easy.
No, no,
Vicky?
skillful,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Vicky?
Yeah, I mean, shock and things falling away. It seems to me, doesn't this all boil down to every kind of feeling of loss? Any kind of feeling of loss. I mean,
Hmm.
the when you the loss of someone else close to you dying. I mean, loss seems one of the most profound things in life everybody has. It's just a commonality, and it seems to embody all the other things we've been talking about, the um, just the kind of lack of your orientation goes away,
Hmm.
and the dread because what's familiar is leaving. But all loss. There's so many kinds of loss, and it seems like that's one of the words it just boils down to for me. I was wondering if you agree.
I think so. Well, I think I'm thinking of another one of quotes from Trungpa Rinpoche that kind of makes you think twice. The chaos should be regarded as extremely good news. But there's actually an opportunity there. We, especially if we realize how much of our life we're actually asleep and caught up and lost in habitual patterns. That something that shakes us up might not be pleasant, but there's an opportunity there.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean you want to have to happen all the time necessarily, but that
like it.
if we can
It's
if we can wake up in that to that opportunity, then that's a great thing.
Yeah, and talk about, I mean, in meditation, the repeat experiences to come back, to sort of be spinning away in some thoughts and to come back. And with loss, there's so much of it in life. We get lots of practice for this opportunity.
Hmm.
So it'd be much harder if it never happened than once happened, it'd be much more difficult. But everybody, you look back at all your losses, they're lessons. Um, I guess practice is good.
Yeah. Liz?
I just wanted to sort of contribute to what Valerie said, which is although like those moments can be really great tragedies, because I know I've definitely experienced that. They're actually blessings in a way too,
Hmm.
because like you said, Michael, but they give you a chance to see what remains after you lose everything and you let everything go. And um, in that substance that remains, that's where we find like our truer nature beyond all the things that we thought about ourselves or wealth, possessions,
Hmm.
even people in our lives that we're attached to. Um, so although they are tragedies, they can be, used and seen as like a blessing.
Well said. Doesn't mean we need to go out and create tragedies for ourselves, but when they occur, another thought I had in reading about the Bardo of Dharmata, and again, we'll say a little bit more next week, and then I guess we'll get into the different visions that appear, is again thinking about the point in meditation where things arise, thoughts, feelings, sense perceptions. And again, the instruction is just to see them in awareness, not to engage in some way. And that's also exactly what we're being asked to do in the Bardo of Dharmata, is to not engage with them in the habitual way of taking them to be real and external, but to just recognize on the spot. So again, it's not something that we make an effort to do in meditation practice. We actually accomplish it by, one of the paradoxes of meditation is you could say it's a doing by not doing, but there's not a conceptual effort not to do either, because that would just be trying to sneak around. But it's just letting go and simply being present in the awareness that we already have and developing confidence in that. Again, that's why there's all those descriptions: naked awareness, uncontrived, unfabricated, because we're so caught up in trying to make things happen or not happen. And just being able to let go and just be is not what we're used to doing. And yet, when we do, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, the things that you could say maybe are a byproduct of meditation, but it's not that they're done through any kind of deliberate effort. So, I guess we could end a bit early, unless there's something else that someone wants to share. And of course, we'll have discussion group tomorrow night. Go ahead, please.
I'll just end on, I guess, one thought, which is that, like, I just started studying Buddhism, so I don't. But one of the concepts or the phrases that came up was taking refuge in the Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think since we're talking about death and letting go, when we do come to that time, and even just tragedy like earthquakes or death and loss and anything that might happen to us, the most important thing is to just keep the memory of that in mind. What that means to take refuge, as in to trust, to let go. And I think a big part of that is also like having faith,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just all I got. It's just to take refuge, to trust, Yeah, since we're talking about death.
And life.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
The discussion group is tomorrow evening, Michael. Not in the morning.
Oh yeah, tomorrow evening. I had two thoughts in mind, which is that I won't be able to join meditation tomorrow morning because I have to get a crown put in, but I will be there tomorrow night. All right, so I guess we should end. We'll close with the dedication of merit, as always. So we'll close by dedicating the merit generated through our practice and study for the benefit of all sentient beings. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Enjoy the Bardo of Dreams. Bye, everyone.
Bye.